everybody, and welcome to the Weatherboys podcast. I am Derek Kevra. That is Alan Longstreet. I am in my basement. Where are you, buddy?
I'm in the guest room. There's a bed behind me that is well made, beautiful. Yeah, it's great. Nothing on the wall in kind of a serial killer sort of way, but without the serial killer part.
Well,
No.
welcome everybody. You are listening to the Weatherboys podcast, and if you are listeners to the podcast, then you know that a couple weeks ago we introduced our new technology that we heavily invested in because we want to bring you what you deserve, dear listener, which is the quality audio and video that you have grown accustomed to while listening to the Weatherboys podcast.
Okay, I'm sorry, but they don't care about that right now, Derek. Here's what I care about. I care about, and actually, they probably don't care about what I'm about to say. You're in your basement where I've spent a lot of time. I've
Yeah.
stayed there many, many times. I have no idea where you are. Everybody, he has completely redone that basement. And when I say he, I mean Derek changed it. He did the work himself. Look, where are you? That
Yeah.
wall, like that TV was not there. Is that what you made?
Yeah, dude, I did all of this. So remember when we talked on the podcast about this hand, how I took
Yes.
a table saw to the hand?
Worth it.
It was all for this. We wanted to, the kids are getting older, and we wanted to like have a space for them, I guess in a way to leave us alone. I mean, I don't know, like a little bit of that, but also
It's
a
fair
little
to
bit
say, out of love.
yeah, and so we wanted them to also have somewhere where they could just kind of retreat to. And so I built that. Not the TV itself, but the stand.
That's impressive.
We got ourselves a couch. Dude, I want you to come over with the girls and play down here and see this space.
So, like in front of you, nobody cares. Last question is the room. That's the
Yeah.
bedroom in front of you, right? Wow, it looks totally different. I like to make fun of you a lot and poke fun of you and like drag you down. I can't. You did phenomenal work, and that looks really great. And it pains me to say that, but it's true.
You are a good friend, even when you try very hard not to be. So thank you.
Yeah, well done. Well done, man.
Dude, what a day today has been. I feel like I've been running around nonstop. So you're listening to the Weatherboys podcast, and if you just stumbled across us and you don't know who we are, we're actual meteorologists. And
In theory.
Our day job is to do the weather.
Yeah.
And today
Oh,
was a
yeah.
day where we were doing the weather.
Sure were. Yeah, you drove through those floodwaters. My car, I was driving through. I went to see the girls today, the kids over at their mom's house, and I drove home, which is only 10 minutes. My car, I was driving through a ponding on the roadways, Derek. I saw it, and my car started to stall out in the middle of a flooded road. Yeah, the battery light went off, and like there are cars behind me and in front of me, and I'm just doing, I'm just Jesus take the wheel. And luckily I got through it, and then it stopped. But it must have been some water in the undercarriage.
Very good. Okay, so I'm glad you're good. I appreciate the kind comments about the basement. Your house looks nice as well. We have a hangout scheduled, which I'm very excited about. This busy summer is getting away from us, but I'm excited for us to chill and the kids to play. But I'm more excited about today's guest.
Yeah, oh for sure. This one is this is delightful. So this guy is many things. Derek Kevra. He's a doctor. He's the director of student accessibility and accommodation services, director of adaptive sports at Michigan Medicine. You know about University of Michigan, don't you, sir?
I've heard a thing or two about it. I'm
a little
excited to
something.
talk to him about everything, including a connection that the internet did not make between him and the university and somebody else. We're going to get into that.
Great. He's a TEDx speaker. He's smarter than us, braver than us, stronger than us, sounder in mind than us. He's everything that we want to be, but we aren't. And his name, I've been working on it all day, Dr. Feranmi Okanlami. But you can call him Dr. O if you want to. Dr. O, hey buddy, how you doing, man? You're here for many reasons, but the way I met you is through our mutual friend Trip, who we did a rugby story with, and then he told me about the adaptive sports program at University of Michigan. So I guess we got to start there. Dr. O, what is adaptive sports?
So adaptive sports, what we say is that adaptive sports are not sports for people with disabilities. Adaptive sports are sports that require a modification of rules or equipment to allow for participation of more people. So sports like wheelchair basketball, sitting volleyball, goalball, wheelchair rugby are traditionally sports that you may have heard of for individuals with disabilities. But the way that we're trying to put a spin on it is by introducing them to people to say that everyone can play adaptive sports, whether you have a disability or not. It just allows people with disabilities to have access to sport and fitness as well.
Okay, so I think a lot of folks know what the Paralympics are, right? And that is specific, but adaptive is everybody. Because when I told some people that we're going to come play wheelchair basketball, they're like, "What are you talking about? That's not fair."
Yeah,
And my
including
response
me,
is,
by the way. I was
"Yeah,
also one of those people.
yeah." And my response is like, "It's not fair for us because the wheelchair levels the playing field." Actually, I mean, because we're not going to know what we're doing.
Yeah, and that's what I say. People talk about leveling the playing field, and I say, well, leveling it in the sense that you're all playing in a wheelchair, but the playing field is not level because if you've never played wheelchair basketball, you're unlikely to be good at wheelchair basketball. But it's not because you're not disabled. It's not because you don't use a wheelchair to navigate your day-to-day life. It's because you've never played wheelchair basketball. I just tell people it's like if you were to go to, a University of Michigan football practice and you then start kicking field goals with a kicker, you're not going to expect to nail a 50-yard field goal, a 55-yard field goal. And that's because you haven't done that. You haven't practiced. So we try to say to people, sport is sport no matter what. And anyone that expects to just show up at a new sport they've never played and be good at it shows that don't really have respect for whatever that sport is that they think they'd be good. So adaptive sports are no different. And it's not a lowering of the bar for people with disabilities. They're truly just sports like anything else. So just like you have to learn how to ice skate to play hockey, you'd need to learn how to maneuver a sport chair to play a wheelchair sport, even though not all adaptive sports are wheelchair sports.
Life took you to the adaptive sports position there at the University of Michigan, but the story of how you got there is pretty. I mean, incredible would be an understatement. I mean, it is inspiring. It's everything. Can you share with our listeners your story?
Certainly, in brief, the adaptive sports specific version of it. I'm from Nigeria. Both of my parents were physicians. We came here when I was young for my parents to pursue post sort of graduate medical education. And so that took me all across the country from Maryland to Indiana. I went to boarding school in Western Massachusetts for high school. And I played all the sports growing up: basketball, soccer, lacrosse, track, tennis, golf. I ended up a varsity athlete at Stanford University, where I continued running track all 4 years, was captain of my team my last 2 years, and considered taking time to train for the Olympics in my last year. But I ended up going straight to medical school at the University of Michigan. And then I matched into my orthopedic surgery residency program at Yale. And I continued playing sports throughout my life, played intramural sports in medical school. But in my third year of orthopedic surgery residency, I dove into a pool and ended up breaking my neck, becoming paralyzed from my chest down with very minimal use of my upper extremities. Now, sport had always been part of my life, and some people view orthopedic surgeons as somewhat of the jocks of the medicine world. And so I was still involved in physical activity and sport medicine, but I had never even heard of adaptive sports at this point in my life. Despite the fact that I was taking care of individuals with disabilities, despite the fact that I was taking care of individuals with sports related injuries, I'd never even heard of them. So I ended up having my two surgeries at Yale, ended up going to inpatient rehabilitation at what was then called the Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago, RIC. It's now called the Shirley Ryan Abilities Lab. And during my inpatient rehab, I was introduced to adaptive sports as part of my rehabilitation. That opened up a whole new world to me, where I then learned that many people have heard of the Paralympics, but people don't often think about where Paralympians come from. People don't often see at their local YMCA or high school sports, you don't see adaptive sports regularly. Not every single community has adaptive sports. Not every college that has collegiate athletes has an adaptive sports program. So I then came back to South Bend, Indiana, where my family's lived for years. And we actually surprisingly had an adaptive sports program in that community. And one day, as I was wheeling out of my outpatient rehab, someone said, "Hey, do you want to come play wheelchair basketball?" And I'd luckily been introduced during rehab in Chicago. And so I knew what it was at that point. And I said, "Of course I want to play wheelchair basketball." And I ended up taking over the wheelchair basketball program and running adaptive sports in my local community. But when I came back to take my faculty position at Michigan, I looked around and said, an institution like the University of Michigan that has world-class academics, world-class athletics, boasts athletic programs that, win national championships all the time, did not have any semblance of adaptive sport for collegiate athletes. And I knew what sport had afforded me as a college student. It's more than just playing sports. It's about time management, teamwork, camaraderie, grit, resilience. It's so much more about creating access to socializing and job opportunities in the future. And the disability community misses out on all of those benefits when you don't have sport. Not even to talk about the health benefits of being physically active, which is another part of that really brought me to it as a physician at that point, with the health disparities that you see in individuals with disabilities that don't get access to physical activity. So yeah, I like not to sort of sensationalize the story at all, because I like to say my spinal cord injury wasn't the most defining moment of my life, but it was something that set me on a path that allowed me to be doing what I'm doing now with a perspective that I don't know if I would have had otherwise.
And it's so interesting to hear you talk about, because you were what, going into your residency when you had your, or during residency when you had your spinal cord injury. So I've heard you talk about this before, that were of the mind of, affecting change through healing bodies. And I know one of your colleagues, Anya, I don't know if she told me this or I heard you talk about it. She has a daughter, and she talked about trying to fix her, trying,
Yeah.
and then you come to a certain point and you say, no, maybe we don't need to be fixed. Maybe the world needs to provide better access to itself, to everybody.
Absolutely. I mean, I thought that I was someone who had empathy. I thought that I lived a world in which I saw everyone as equal and gave access to everyone. Both of my parents being not just physicians, but pediatric intensive care physicians, were children who did nothing wrong themselves, right? To then have whatever disability or illness or disease that they ended up having. My parents, took care of these children. So I grew up in a world and a household where I felt like we were good people, right? And I didn't realize how I had been unintentionally complicit in this world of ableism, right? Now, ableism is really what you just mentioned, is the fact that our world is created with non-disabled individuals in mind. And we give opportunities and access and resources and create systems and policies based on that. And so then when a disabled person shows up, they're automatically meant to feel like they don't belong. And when they have to get the same access that other people get, they have to demand it or sue for it or request it or beg for it. Are made to feel like they're in the way or a burden. There's additional cost related to it. Things don't fit them and they can't just navigate the space like anyone else can. And so ableism is the reason why we have to retrofit things to make them accessible. And so that's what you were getting at, Alan, is that there's nothing wrong with the individual that's disabled. They're living life just like anybody else is living life. And while I acquired my disability, there are many people that are born with disabilities that didn't see a life without disability, that now they have to adapt to a new one. They came into this world without the ability to hear or see. And the world was not built to then give them access automatically. And so that is something that has significantly changed my perspective now, because as someone that I describe living life from both sides of the stethoscope, is what I say, I know what it's like on that medical side of a physician that's trying to fix or heal or prevent. And the tricky part is that there's nothing wrong with trying to find cures to things. But what needs to also happen is we need to create a world that has access for people for whom there will never be and may never be a cure. For someone who shouldn't have to live in a world where their body or their mind, the way that they think, see, walk, hear, process, is seen as a negative, and therefore they're made to feel less valuable, like they don't deserve access, and that you're trying to do something special for them because of the special needs they have. I say that the needs of the disability community are not special. They are no different than the needs of the non-disabled community. But for some reason, we are just more comfortable not providing their needs. So that's where sort of adaptive sport is this vehicle for us to say, everyone deserves to have access to sport. If you think of it as that, everyone deserves to. But the way that you provide that access, the mechanism by which you do it, might just look different. And it doesn't mean that someone else can't also participate with you. And we're really trying to make that shift. And it's going to be hard because it's difficult to change perceptions of disability. But what we're trying to say and what we're trying to do, even at the youth level, is to say, if we can embed adaptive sports in middle school PE classes. So now as you're growing up, you've got this one kid in your class that's a wheelchair user. You're not learning how to play wheelchair basketball or wheelchair tennis or goal ball or sitting volleyball because you've got a disabled classmate. You're learning to play these sports just because these sports exist. But guess what? When that one or two or three disabled kids show up in that community, they now have sports that they can play, and it's just normal. So all kids are like, oh, yeah, I play wheelchair tennis and I play wheelchair basketball since I was 6, and I don't even have a disability.
Yeah, it is funny you talk about changing the narrative. I've started following a few of the folks associated with with the program in Michigan and surrounding it. And there's one woman in particular who I'm not sure what her disability is, but sometimes it can appear to folks that she doesn't have. They say, why are you playing wheelchair basketball? And it's so interesting. I think it was basketball. It's so interesting to see the anger from people who know nothing about it that's geared toward her when she's doing nothing wrong whatsoever. But yet to change that narrative is not an easy thing, and that's got to take some right there. That's the inspiration that you are. You don't have to do this. You're trying to enact change throughout the world. Where's that come from, man?
Well, I first start by saying that my parents instilled this in me, right? It is not something that I think I'm doing in any sort of inspirational or special way. It's just that I always saw my parents supporting others. And that's why I said that this was it was a shock for me to see a space in which I was so very like oblivious to, right? Despite thinking that we lived, and I'm Christian, grew up going to church, taking care of people, like service was something that was built into my life. But when I saw the disability community in a way that I'd never seen it before, when I then entered the disability community, it's what made me see that this isn't even some sort of, oh, I'm looking for a pat on the back or I'm looking for someone to say, attaboy for being this inspiration. It's just that I know what I have been afforded throughout my life. And I know that despite all of the different degrees that I've received and the educational background and the pedigree, becoming a disabled individual is something that has created this stark contrast in the way that people treat me and in the access I've received. And I know that I'm a person with privilege and power and positions that, I don't necessarily deserve. But there are people that then enter this disability community either from birth or through acquiring something that if they don't have the same resources or the same background that I do, they're not going to get access and opportunity. And that's the reason why this is a passion for me, to then make sure that not just through sport, but through all elements of sort of living in a community, we have access. And so, I really want to credit my family, I want to credit my faith, I want to credit the team of individuals that I have then come to meet, this community of individuals that have allowed me to sort of shape my disability identity in a way that makes me not feel ashamed to be disabled. And I want to then make sure that every little child that grows up in any community doesn't see themselves as different in a negative way, because we're all different in some way, but that difference should not be made to feel like it's a bad thing.
Dr. O, I keep looking for the quote that I heard when I was doing some research for this podcast. I think you said disability is not inability. I think that's what it was. And I've I haven't jumped in yet in this conversation because I'm afraid I'm going to get emotional. I'll explain why. My uncle, who I grew up with my entire life, he had an injury, spinal cord injury, very identical to yours. 18 years old, he dove into a pool. He was a heck of an athlete. He was 6'8". His head hit the bottom of the pool. Quadriplegic. He's been quadriplegic the rest of his life, and he's still alive. I mean, he's actually reached out to him before this podcast to make sure he was comfortable with me telling his story. And I feel like when I listen to you right here, I'm a bit ashamed because I grew up with this. I should know more than I do. And it makes me sad that I'd never had a franker conversation with him earlier in life, because there were things that I didn't know what to do. I did he want to be pushed, Or maybe, and I was like, oh, well, I don't want to insult him. So I don't want to get behind the wheelchair and push him. But I never had the courage to just ask him, is this okay if I do this? Do you not like it if I do that? And I feel like the more I listen to you, that's part of your messaging is just because we have a disability doesn't mean we're not people. Talk to me, have a conversation with me, ask me how I'm feeling, ask me if I want that. I never did that. And I think I never did that because I was scared. I didn't want to hurt his feelings. I didn't want to be rude. But I feel like it was ruder not to.
Well, not knowing your life and your background, I'll say that that's not your fault. And, whatever sort of permission I can give you to release yourself from that feeling, you shouldn't feel any guilt there because that's because of the way that the world has created this narrative around disability, the stigma around disability, where there is that thing where it's like, oh, honey, don't stare. Don't look at that person in a wheelchair. Don't look at that child with a disability. Like, oh, that's not nice to do that. Don't ask questions about that. But children are inherently curious. And when we tell them that something is something that they should not look at or talk about, then it becomes this taboo thing. But if we just normalize the fact that, yes, there are disabled people in this world, and you're going to interact with them, and you should interact with them just like you interact with anybody else. And so, yes, I wish you had felt like you could have asked that question because, as you said, who knows what world that would have opened up, about what your uncle would have told you.
But that's what's so great about what you're doing and what your messaging is disability is not inability. And the other catchphrase is what
Disabusing
Disabuse.
disability.
disabusing disability. You're normalizing it. You're making it, you know, we want to do the same things. We just want access to it as well. In my neighborhood, there was discussion of putting in a playground, and they wanted to use some funds to put in a playground. And it was brought up, well, it has to be ADA compliant. And well, if it's ADA compliant, that's going to make the cost go up 4 times. Well, who cares? Because the message you're sending, if you don't make it ADA compliant, is that we're not welcome or we're a burden. And these are all the conversations that we should be having to include everybody, including folks that have disabilities.
Right. And the thing about that is there are times where access is more expensive and it doesn't even need to be. So for example, I talked to somebody about this just the other day. I just finished, building a house. And I'll ask you a question. Underneath your sink in your bathroom, what exists underneath the sink in your bathroom? Like if you look under your sink, what's there?
The plumbing.
What is it? A cabinet?
Yeah, it's the cabinet that's the plumbing, and yeah, right.
So there's a cabinet there. So I do not want a cabinet under my sink. Why? Because I want to be able to roll under the sink in my kitchen, in my bathroom. So I want fewer cabinets. Do you think it was more or less expensive for me to have fewer cabinets?
It should be less, but it was probably more for some weird reason. Yeah.
And I say ableism. It's because it's not the norm. It's not the
Yeah,
standard of
sure.
what we do that then they're like, oh, well, that's a custom upgrade. Same sort of thing. I don't want steps to get into my house. Most homes that you see, there'll be some sort of steps to get up to the front door in some way, right? So once again, less concrete, less brick, less whatever it is that you're going to have, flat entrance to my home, custom upgrade, more expensive. For
Mm,
some reason, the way that we create even just the houses in which people live, that this is my own home, that I'm paying money to
Sure.
build, it's still something that people see this as custom and different. And so it becomes more expensive. There's a cartoon I use in many of my talks that snow fell in front of a school, and there's some stairs right here, and there's a ramp over here. There are about 8 kids waiting to get in through the steps, and 1 kid that's waiting to go up the ramp. And the custodian is shoveling snow off the steps. And so the little child that's a wheelchair user goes, "Sir, would you please shovel the snow off the ramp so I can get in?" And the custodian goes, "Well, I've got to shovel all the snow off the stairs so these kids can get in. And once I'm done doing that, I'll shovel the ramp for you." But then the
mm,
wheelchair using kid says, "But if you shovel the ramp, we can all get in." And I tell people, how many literal and figurative ramps can we create that provide access for who you think is just one, but that everybody can take that path as well? So just because we are used to then using the stairs literally and figuratively doesn't mean that if every building we entered had ramps, that non-disabled people wouldn't be able to get in anymore. But it just means that now the wheelchair user, the delivery driver with a dolly, the parent pushing a stroller, everybody can get in that way. And then it will drive down this cost of retrofitting buildings and things to make them accessible. If we stop thinking about the ableist way that we create structures and we think about what people need to have access. And if you think about those that have the greatest access need, you're going to create things that are accessible to more people.
Well, when you say it like that, it makes perfect sense. But when are you going to make the movie? Because like changing narratives is hard. When you're talking like worldwide change or nationwide change, like that is a I'd imagine a hard thing to do. And you, sir, I think you could write a movie. And I think that because just I'm visualizing the story that you just told. And never once in my entire life did I think of it that way. Not that I'm shoveling snow for some and not for others, and maybe I am metaphorically speaking. But when you say that, it's like these are simple solutions that a lot of us haven't even given a thought to.
And as I said earlier, I hadn't either, which is the reason why I extend grace to everyone because I don't position myself as being better than anybody else. I just happened to then have this experience that changed the way that I viewed the world. And I don't know, humbly and honestly, I don't know that I would have viewed it differently if it weren't for my own disability. But what I try to say to people is that it doesn't take you having a disability to then see the world in this way. It just takes you having the ability to then hear someone that is telling you this and starting to then look at the world through a different lens. And that's, I think, what I'm trying to do. And I say once again that I am not the first or the best or the only, and I'm merely one person in this large community of individuals trying to do it. And I just feel fortunate to have been given an opportunity to try to then change that narrative within the sphere of influence that I have.
Can we talk about inspiration? Because I think both Derek and I have said that word, and I've heard you talk about how inspiration is a loaded term for the disabled community. What do you mean by that? What should we know about that?
So I will reference a TED Talk, and it's by someone named Stella Young. Her TED Talk is called I Am Not Your Inspiration. And the reason behind that is because what happens oftentimes is people will see me, in the grocery store, and they'll come up to me and they'll say, "Ugh, it's so inspiring to see you here. If I were in your condition, I don't know if I'd be able to do that." And I'd say, "You don't know if you'd be able to buy milk?" My son just wants some cereal and we ran out of milk. So I'm just here buying milk. It's like, I just don't know if I'd be able to be out of the house. And it's because what's happening is they're lowering the bar of expectations for the disability community. And what they're really saying is it must be so hard to be disabled. It must be so hard to live the life you live. And how could you even come out of the house, all the barriers that you must have experienced? And so what I say to people is that what you're acknowledging is the fact that the world is not accessible to individuals with disabilities. So that's problem number one. But then two, you don't even expect us to be able to do simple things like go get milk from the grocery store so that you call us inspirational for doing something that you would not have thought was inspirational if somebody else was doing it. So that's the reason why it's so loaded at times is that it isn't really a positive thing for you to be inspired by me doing something that's not inspiring. But what I say to people is that if you would be inspired by someone that wasn't disabled doing that very thing, I don't want the disability community to never be able to be called inspirational, right? There are some things that some of our folks do so that I would like to say that I've done before that I'm totally fine with you thinking it's inspirational, but not because I'm disabled. It's just because you have accomplished something that you say, wow, that must have been like that was hard, or that whatever it is that inspires someone. But I'm going to borrow this phrase from another one of my colleagues. It's inspired to what? You are inspired to do what when you see that? Like, what are you inspired by? Don't just say, oh, you're such an inspiration. Why? What is it about that thing that changes something in you? So don't lower expectations for people and now be inspired by them doing something that you're not actually inspired by. But if that inspires you to then create access in your community, if that inspires you to then work harder, to then move faster, to whatever that is, you can be inspired. But what my colleague says is inspired to do what?
Let's talk a little bit about identity because throughout our lives, we often identify ourselves through our accomplishments. And I think, like, if we would just go back, like, I mean, you were almost an Olympian. I mean, that's part of your identity. You're a doctor, a physician. That's part of your identity. How do you not, or maybe you do, and I don't want to speak, but does your accident, or does that define you? Is that part of your personal identity, or do you not want it to be?
It is 100% part of my identity. So I've had this same conversation and you listed a few: physician, athlete, father, Christian, man, black man, right? These are all things that they're elements of your identity that you choose, and there are elements of your identity that you do not choose. I did not choose to be black. I did not choose to be a man. I did choose to become an athlete. I did choose to go to school to become a physician, right? These are things that create the totality of who I am. I do not believe that any one of those things defines me in and of itself, but all of those things are the defining characteristics that then make me who I am. But the tough part about it is that other people will define you based on what they choose should be the most salient aspect of your identity. And so like I can look at the intersectionality of this experience for me, where someone could come in to see me as a patient, and if the most salient part of my identity to them is that I'm a person of color, I'm a black man, and they don't like black people, doesn't matter that I might be the most skilled physician in the world for whatever it is they came to see me for. They don't want to have anything to do with me because of my blackness, right? There might be times in which I want to enter a space, and it is the fact that I'm a person with a disability that then makes someone say, we don't have access for you here. You could be the greatest person in the world, whether you're the greatest parent or the greatest athlete, but we just can't provide access for you because of whatever reason. People see the disability as that defining characteristic. So what I tell people is that you can't necessarily other people should not be able to define for you how you are seen. And that's actually a quote that I take from it's a video that I was introduced to actually by another mutual friend of ours, Anya. It's called Whale Eyes. And you can look up this video and watch Whale Eyes at some point.
I
But
did.
you've seen it? So,
Well, because of you.
so this individual, what he talks about, so he has a disability that impacts his vision. And what he says is, I have no problem with how I see. What I have a problem with is the way I am seen. And that was such a beautiful way, because his vision is such that he has a specific sort of visual disability that then impacts, the way that he can focus on things. And he has one eye that does not look in the same direction as the other eye. And what he tells people to do is to look at the eye that's looking at them, right? And so he goes through showing people the world through his eyes, and he calls it whale eyes because he says, we look at whales, people go whale watching, right? They're these beautiful creatures that we love. However, if you notice in most whales, you can only see one of their eyes at a time. And that doesn't become a problem to us because we have to only look at one eye. He said, so why is it that that's such a problem for me? And that when I tell you to just focus on the one eye that looks back at you, that should be okay. Yet my disability is seen as something that is uncomfortable for people, even though the beauty of whales is not something that then people care that you can only see one eye at a time. So he tells this beautiful narrative about how the world sees him and how he experiences the world as a person with a disability. And that is a video that really changed my colleague's world, because her daughter is low vision. And I think Alan might have mentioned this earlier. She went most of her life, as her daughter was growing up, trying to fix her, trying to eliminate that disability. And there was one point where she says, I can't imagine looking at you 10, 15 years down the road and telling you that I thought something was wrong with you, telling you that I was trying to then get rid of this thing that makes you beautiful and unique. And you, right? There's nothing wrong with you. It's the way the world sees you, and the fact that the world doesn't think that you deserve to have access to things, and therefore they don't give you this access. I know I've been talking for a bit, but I'm going to tell you a story again. There's a woman by the name of Haben Girma, Haben, last name Girma. She identifies as deaf blind, and she wrote a book recently called Haben, the Deaf Blind Woman Who Conquered Harvard Law. So she tells a story that I've now sort of co-opted, and she knows I've done this. We did a presentation together a couple months ago, and I used this story as well. She went to a cafeteria at her college, and she asked for a menu, right? Now she is deaf blind. So she asked for a menu, and they said, you know what, I'm sorry, we don't have the resources to be able to provide the special needs for people like you. And so then she says, you know what? I guarantee that in this cafeteria, you have chairs. And they were like, of course we have chairs. People need to come in and sit down to eat in the cafeteria. She said, you do realize that chairs are an accommodation for individuals that aren't wheelchair users. And the person was like, wait, what? What are you talking about? And this is where now I co-opt the story and I editorialize it a bit. If everyone was as considerate as I am, as a wheelchair user, and everyone brought a chair with them, whenever you'd go to a cafeteria, the cafeteria doesn't have to provide you with chairs. I brought my own chair with me. If all of you had brought a chair too, the cafeteria wouldn't need to have chairs, right? And then she says, I guarantee there are lights in this space as well. And I said, of course there are lights. Like, people need to be able to see to get the food. She said, lights are an accommodation for sighted individuals. She said, I don't need light to navigate this space, and I'm going to get around and find my food and do this just fine. And so what it does is, it sounds funny to people, but what it shows is that providing chairs, providing light, these are things that seem to be no-brainers. Of course we're going to do that. But imagine if every single classroom, auditorium, building you went in expected you to bring your own chair, bring your own flashlight to be able to see your way around. That's the way the disability community feels and lives every single day.
And
Because the
oh
go
no,
for
go
it.
ahead.
Just
Mine
so,
was
because the things that we need are no different than the things that you need. But for some reason, when there's no access for us, it's considered a special need. It's considered something that makes us a burden to provide. But if we think about how to create access for more people, then some of those things would just be there. But go ahead, Alan.
Well, I know we have to go real quick, but on that note, I heard you say before you spoke about the disability community being the largest minority. So from a business standpoint, there would be a lot to gain from that as well. Because I can imagine someone saying to you, well, fine, but at the end of the day, there are only so many of these people that it doesn't make financial sense. But I mean, that just might be so much wrong in the way that we're thinking about these problems.
And the data has already been there, right? I've once again got colleagues that have done this to show that if you create access for the disability community, it is going to impact your bottom line positively. Because as we said, disability, while I talk about being a wheelchair user, that's my lived experience, there are so many forms of disability that if you just exclude disabled people altogether, you're excluding more people than you might recognize. And when you include disability, when you're more accessible and inclusive, you're going to realize that there are more people than you know that identify as having some sort of disability. And then you're going to then allow a larger group of people to come patronize your establishment, to buy your resources, to come use your things. And you're going to then end up making more money, having more customers, having better business in the long run. Sure, in the very, very short term, it might be a larger financial sort of investment to then do whatever the thing is that you need to do to make it more accessible. But in the long run, you are absolutely increasing your potential. The total accessible market for what you then have at your disposal is actually larger when you include the disability community. And that is what you're then availing yourself of by being more accessible.
Dr. O, I don't want to run out of time before giving you an opportunity to let people know how they can get more involved with the programs, or at least find out more information.
Well, there are multiple programs now. We've started talking through adaptive sport, but this is a great conversation that sort of opened up into the disability community more broadly. But with respect to adaptive sports here at the University of Michigan, we've been really fortunate to create a program that's not just for student athletes. We've got individuals in the community that participate in our programs as well. We've then embedded adaptive sports in the PE programs of the public schools in our area, of the middle schools, and we're starting to get into the high schools as well. But if anyone is interested in learning more about disability in general, participating in adaptive sports, we've got a wonderful website at umishadaptivesports.com, and that is something that people can come find. I am totally open to people finding me on LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook or my email to then connect them to the resources. And I would love to be able to direct people to whatever it is that sort of piques their interest, whether it's adaptive sport, whether it's academic accommodations, whether it's testing accommodations, whether it's kayaking or rock climbing or whatever it is that you are interested in doing. I guarantee you there's a way that you can make whatever you're passionate about more accessible in your community. And I think that is what I try to encourage people to do, is find the thing that you love already And let's see how we can make sure that more people can participate in that, because you're not necessarily going to have a fire lit in you for something that you're not already passionate about. But if you get something that you're already passionate about and you want more people to experience that with you, that I think is what's going to push people. So for me, I've always loved sports. Like, it's something I've always done. And when I wasn't able to do it is when I said, I need to find a way back. But what that way back is doing is allowing so many more people who may have also either lost the ability to play the sport that they thought they could, or maybe they grew up never playing sports because no one introduced it to them. So now we're opening up all these doors for people, some people who are not even disabled, right? To then be able to play sports in a way that they never thought they could, because they now get introduced to para sport and they see a more inclusive and accessible community that was more welcoming to them than their elementary school sports were, because of the way that those were created. For whatever reason, they may not be disabled, but their mind or body does not work or move or think in the normative way. And this is the open door. So, I've started to get all passionate and ramble again here, but the websites and the emails and things, I'm sure we can then provide some links afterwards to then connect people. But if there's one thing that I want people to take away, it's not even how to get involved in my program. It's not how to get in touch with me. It's how they can then look at the community in which they live. And all it takes is then opening your eyes and seeing things in a different way. Because if your space isn't accessible, you might not have a friend or a person in your community that does have a disability that you know, because they haven't been able to get in. But if you think about this now and say, how could a wheelchair user navigate through this space? How could someone who is blind or deaf participate in this program? How is this resource going to be made accessible to someone who doesn't see or hear or think or navigate the same way I do? And if you notice that, you can then be the ones to then change your own individual communities to make them more accessible. And I guarantee that you'll start to find the disabled people in your community, because they're there somewhere. And they've been trying to get access probably. You just haven't seen them, just like I didn't know this, even though I thought I was then creating access as a physician. And so I will end by saying that the past may not be your fault. So don't beat yourself up over what's going on in the past. However, the future will be. So what is it that we can all do to make somebody's tomorrow better than their yesterday? Just by creating access and opportunity. That's it. Nothing earth-shattering, nothing super hard, nothing that's super expensive. Just think about who may not be at the table and then try to figure out a way to get them there, not by speaking for them or acting for them, but merely by creating access to allow them to show up and then be them their full selves and live a life just like you're trying to do.
Incredible. Dr. O, thank
You
you.
do know we'll ask you back. This
Yeah.
is not a one and done, sir. So sorry, you've done that to yourself.
It would be a pleasure. This has been a delightful conversation. I appreciate the openness, and I hope that we can report back to your uncle and maybe have a conversation with your uncle someday if he'd be open to it, because I think that what happened there was you seeing how this was something that your life, you were involved in this already without fully acknowledging it in some way. And I think those are the spaces where we can connect with people and real stories and the impact that people have had. And I don't know what your uncle's life has been, but that might be one avenue for you and your family to then look into disability and access. And who knows what
Yep.
that may mean for your uncle.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to say, I was both nervous and excited to have this conversation, but I couldn't be leaving more inspired to do exactly what you said, is be more open-minded and think about things a little bit differently and make choices that are better for everybody, not just the people that I see and that relate because I had that experience, is to think about outside of my own experience. So Dr. O, for that alone, I just appreciate the hell out of this conversation. Thank you.
No, thank you all. And I'll end by saying that not all disabilities are visible as well. And that's something I try to strive to add to every conversation. Just because mine is one that you can see doesn't mean that's any more important than those that you can't see. So that's why it's more than just, this, what ramps can we build, but it's what ways can we literally and figuratively create these ramps and build this access by just recognizing that disability does not mean inability. And so we shouldn't judge or limit people based on what they cannot do. We should just give them the access to then show what they can.
All right, we'll end it right there. Dr. O, thank you very much. You've been listening to or perhaps watching the Weatherboys podcast. We have all of our episodes on Spotify, YouTube, and the Fox Local app, which is free to download, and the entire Weatherboys library is listed right there. All right, we'll see you guys next time. Bye. Okay, I know the podcast wrapped up and we said goodbye and all that kind of stuff, but after we hung up, Dr. O shared a little story with us, so we have a bonus clip that we want to share with the viewers, right? Because we can't let this one slide.
No, there were like three that we didn't record that we have to let slide for now, but we must have this man back.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so a little bonus clip. You got it. You got to hear it. The podcast is not over. Listen up. So, okay, we got to back this up real quick here because I made a joke about you were at Stanford, Harbaugh was at Stanford. You're at University of Michigan, Harbaugh's at University of Michigan. Please don't leave and go to San Diego. And then Dr. O, you blew our minds with a story. Can you say it one more time?
Yeah, it was actually a very simple exchange where I was in the weight room. I was a track and field athlete, and Harbaugh came up to me and he's like, "Young man, you ever caught a football?" I said, "No, sir." He said, "Would you like to learn?" I said, "No, sir." And that was the end of the conversation.
But you were an athlete. You loved sports. You knew who he was, and you had zero interest.
Well, so here's the part that's going to sound unfair to say it, but while I was at Stanford, the Stanford football team was terrible. And I was, not to be arrogant at this point, I was an academic All-American athlete. I'd been the president of my class. I was leader of student groups. I was, doing well in my sport. And Stanford was one of these schools where all of our sports were great. And so our football team was not this like up on the top of the totem pole type of dynamic, right? And so I didn't see what I was missing. And mind you, I came from Nigeria. None of my uncles or my dad or any of the men in my family, football wasn't some big thing to us at that point. So I didn't realize what I was saying no to. Now, I'll be very honest with you and say, today, if I had understood that, I might have had a different answer, except that now all this concussion stuff has happened too. So my 14-year-old son is not playing football. So
Nope.
I don't regret that I didn't play football. But yeah, I mean, like, I don't know, does the name Richard Sherman mean anything to you?
Oh, just a little bit, just a tiny little bit. Yeah.
Sherman was my roommate. So he came behind me at Stanford.
What?
And I jokingly say this, which is the truth. Like, he did the event that I did and was my little brother, right? So, and he was not who you know him to be now at that time. And I remember the day that we were on a track trip and he said to me, he's like, "I'm going to go to the league." And I was like, "Okay, Sherm, like, all right, like, we'll see." But that was, so he had his own dynamic with Harbaugh. I don't know if you know, but
Yeah.
Harbaugh is the one that flipped him from a wide receiver to a corner. And it was also something that was done, off the record in a way because they didn't really get along. And so he changed his position that put him further away from Harbaugh on the team, but then he developed into this all-star, like pro, all-pro cornerback that did wonderful things in the league. But yeah, so there are a whole bunch of stories like this. I told you the Facebook story. I told you the Harbaugh story. There's the Sherman story. So